So good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today as we celebrate International Women's Day. My name is Kathy Lang. I serve as online education coordinator through Open Academy at SUNY ESF, as well as academic advisor to our students in the Sustainability Management Bachelor's Program. Welcome for those that are here. And that is ESF's first online degree. For today's event, we will be recording the session, including Q&A, which we typically don't do, but we feel we've been missing some gems from these presentations. So we want to capture the entire conversation. Doug Johnston, Sustainability Management Curriculum Coordinator and faculty in Landscape Architecture, will facilitate that with our presenter. So feel free to ask questions through the chat throughout, or if you're comfortable, unmute and go live. So this series is co-sponsored by the Sustainability Management degree program and the Office of Career Services. So I did have a couple slides about that, our degree program and Office of Career Services. If you wanted to view today's recording or from past presentations, you can go to the Career Services playlist. And if you have any suggestions for future presenters, I welcome them. And as a participant today, you'll also receive an email follow-up with an evaluation and another opportunity to share any suggestions. So to introduce our final presenter for this semester, please welcome John Turbyville, Director of ESF's Office of Career Services. Thanks, John.
Thanks so much, Kathy. We in Career Services are happy to have partnered with Kathy and the Open Academy on this series of webinars on professionals in sustainability. And I'm excited today to welcome Jodi Smits Anderson. Jodi has recently joined EYP as the managing principal of the Albany office after serving nearly 15 years as the Director of Sustainability Programs for DASNY, a New York State government authority. Jodi has served in leadership roles at the regional and national levels of the U.S. Green Building Council and has been recognized as the Green Building Advocate Award recipient in 2018. Jodi's going to speak to us today about her overall approach to work and daily life, with themes to include sustainability is in everything. You don't have to leave your job to have a sustainability role. And her biggest struggle, and one that I can't wait to hear more about, why joy in work is sometimes taken as a lack of seriousness. Thank you to Jodi for being with us today. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to you.
Hey, thanks very much. Wow, I'm excited to meet this person. I'm really glad to be here. It's interesting how, and I'm going to say this to start us off, how you stumble around in your career until all of a sudden people think you know what you're doing. And I think that that's a marvelous thing to start with. If you're creating a position, and I would say sustainability is something that didn't exist even 20 years ago, let alone 30 years ago, as a career, you kind of fake it until you figure out what it's all about and where you can be of use and what skills you can bring to the table. And that's something that I'm really pleased that I'm in a place in my career where people can turn to me and say, how would you approach this? Or how come you look comfortable when nobody knows what you're doing? And it's only unnerving to me when nobody's around, and then I can be a little unnerved. But when I'm in the middle of the work, I find that the people around me sustain me, and that's part of sustainability work. So what I thought I'd do, if it's okay with everyone, I have a very short prezi that I put together to just kind of introduce how my brain works a little bit. And then from there, I just thought I'd tell the arc of my career, and hopefully it's still on the rise. And then we can get into a real discussion. And just as was said earlier, please put questions as you have them into the chat. Let's make sure it's a real dialogue, because I am a huge believer in the idea that if one person's trying to do something without conversing with people around them and getting inputs from people around them, they're going to miss the real gem of the work and the real value there. So I want to hold that true here as well. So I'm going to share my screen and see if I can get to the right one. All right, so there's first my screen, and then I have to pull up the Prezi. So give me one more second. Can you guys see eyes? All right. So this is a photograph of my son. And at one point I did a presentation about the uptake of solar in New York. This was probably 15 years ago. And I had this picture of him, and I really just kept reflecting on how important it was to think differently in order to support my son in everything he does. He's now 19 and studying photography at Pratt. And his eyes are just as blue, but his hair is not quite as blonde. So one of the things that I have come to realize through the years, and let me minimize some people on the side here, okay, is that there are disconnects everywhere. And some of the ones that I've heard, and these might sound familiar to you, I think everyone hears different disconnects depending on their role. As an architect and as a director of sustainability, I tend to hear things like, energy code is already so tight, we don't have to do more. This is just one building and it's such a small project, what does it matter? Of course, the big one over the last 2+ years is we have to worry about COVID. Energy is not important. We have to make sure people are healthy. Our clients are not asking for it. This is one that actually made the last few years that I was involved with DASNY very, very hard. It's because we're a service organization, but we're also DASNY, Dormitory Authority State of New York, is also an organization of incredibly talented and knowledgeable professionals. And for some reason, we didn't feel like we could bring that knowledge to the table because we were just trying to serve the clients. But in my opinion, and I think it bears out by the way things work, when a client comes to you, they're looking to you for your expertise. So bring it. That's one of the things that is a disconnect we have to get over. I can't do it on this project, or it's too soon, this project is too risky, I can't talk about sustainability or carbon or energy or health. And then the big one is it costs more. So we've put ourselves into a position where we're very good at doing what we already know how to do. And that has led to things like this picture is the roof edge of a building, and the bright color is where heat is just leaking out of that building constantly. Well, not only do we know how to do better than this in new buildings, we know how to fix this in existing buildings, and it should be part of a maintenance plan. So there you go. Let's bring that up. Let's talk about it. We're very aware that there are wildfires, there are floods, that the weather is erratic and the climate is warming as a whole across the planet. It's uncomfortable to talk about these things, but talking about them means that we can face them and do work with them. So it needs to be constantly asked, when are we going to face these and who's going to do something about it? And I think when is hopefully now, and who is every single one of us in our own ways. It's not going to be the same for everybody. So to move forward to a connected thought, every project matters. Every project matters in different ways, different potential, different possibilities. The world has changed. So even if you're really good at doing something and you've been doing it that way for 10 years, it doesn't matter if you're exceptional at it. What matters is that budgets have changed, the climate has changed, people have changed, connectivity has changed, awareness of equity has changed, everything has changed. Climate is absolutely an imperative, and a lot of people shy away from that word and that reality. Improvements don't have to cost more. That's a big realization, and people have to lean into that. We won't get it 100% right the first time. And I think one of the big problems in our world is that we're afraid to talk about where things didn't go right because it reflects badly on us. And I don't think that's true at all. The more we can talk about the things that didn't go right, the more we can get closer to right. And my son had an expression in Montessori school, in middle school. Probably you've all heard practice makes perfect. Well, they changed that up, and it's practice makes progress, which I think is much more powerful. Clients have sustainability and carbon neutral goals. When whether we're talking about products, services, buildings, community planning, whatever, we should be looking out beyond where we are to see what other things should be information for us to do our work better. And it's all about health and well-being. We're not trying to save the planet without us. We're not trying to save the planet so that we can be miserable. We're trying to do all of this together. And these are just some snapshots of things that I've picked up over the years. UB having a climate neutrality plan by 2030, the state sharing information so that everyone can be supported with scientifically sound decision-making resources. It's really incredible, the data that's out there. When profit-driven companies make pledges and start to follow through on them to eliminate fossil fuel use, that's pretty huge. When we recognize that it's not, sustainability can't just be about energy use or about material close cycles or about, it has to be and. We have to talk about mental function. We have to talk about health. We have to talk about profitability and the economy. And this is just a quick example of looking how small actions aggregate, and all of the units are, unfamiliar, but you can see the order of magnitude. If we built low-rise residential construction at the scale that we would have built it in 2017, if we built that all paying attention to embodied carbon, the best case scenario is we would remove the emissions of 10 coal plants already in existence. The worst case scenario, which is actually what we currently still do, we would have had to add 23 additional coal plants to have that carbon, to equate to that carbon. So every single one of those decisions was important in all of that multi-rise work. And then I think this is the one that's most pivotal to me, is the example of a risk is just a checkbox where there's no discussion, where there's no understanding, where there's no collaborative effort to see what the co-benefits and co-burdens might be of that decision. That is a non-sustainable process. And that's what we do most of the time. We even do that with energy code, and that kind of drives me nuts. And we do it with the lead rating system and other systems that should be facilitators of discussions. We don't use them that way. So it really is about the process, and it's really a thinking process. So if you're looking purely at cost of materials, Charles Kettering quote that I really liked is the more brain power you use, the fewer materials you will need. So we can look at this as, if you want to, as efficiency. I like the word effectiveness better, or optimization. And that's my information, which you can get from me anytime or get through this recording. And I'm going to stop sharing because, like I said, that was just a little presentation to kind of introduce how I think we really have to think about how we're communicating more than anything, and what we think of as pertinent to the work at hand and what we think of as separate, because I have a real problem with things being separate. So do we want to take a second for questions and then go into the arc of my career to date and some of the things I've learned?
Yeah, I would say if anyone has a question, feel free to put it in the chat space, or if, again, as Kathy said, if you're not shy, unmute your mic and toss out a question now. I think my questions are going to come after you talk about where you're working. So, all
right, I want to thank you for the beautiful eyes comment, Katrina. My dad had the same eyes, actually. So
I'm not seeing any. So why don't we keep moving, and then I'm sure there'll be questions people are thinking about and forming. So,
yeah, no worries at all. So let's see. I can tell you, I'm going to just run through, like I said, where I started and where I am now. I graduated from RPI, degree in Bachelor's of Building Science and a Bachelor's of Architecture. It was very hard to get an architecture job right out of school at RPI because it was a recession in the 90s, in the early 90s. Out of 18 graduates from the School of Architecture, only one person had a job in architecture within the next year. And I wasn't one of them. I eventually got a job with Greg Selman Architects, and I was the print room technician. And I made a whopping $6.20 an hour to run the diazo machine, which was still ammonia based, and to take the cars to the shop to get them updated so people could do their site visits. And I did some drafting. And at that point in time, the office was transitioning from hand drafting to computers. And I was still a hand drafter, which makes me sound a lot older than I am, but there you go. It was a great firm. I really loved working for them. There were 26 people as part of that firm. And one night, people started getting called into the president's office, and the firm went from 26 people down to 13 people. And I luckily was so cheap that they kept me, but I kind of saw the writing on the wall. And then I ended up traveling the world for a year with a performance group, Up With People. And in the course of that wonderful dancing around the world and singing, I stayed with 85 different host families and visited 9 different countries and performed a 2-hour-long music and dance show for 180 some odd times. And also met the man who would eventually be my husband. That was not the plan. Despite the fact that everyone said you're traveling the world to find a man, I said, nope, that wasn't the plan. It was an accident and I hated it. And I was so angry. But I ended up living in the Netherlands for about 1.5 years with Martin, and we were married over there and moved back here. In between Up With People and moving to the Netherlands, I worked for some places around here like a bagel shop and a bookstore. And I didn't get back into architecture. I couldn't, it was happening too fast. In the Netherlands, what was fascinating to me is really high equality socially for women. But as far as the professions, not a very equal nation. In the mid-90s, there had been a law on the books until 1985 that if you were married and your husband had a job, you were not allowed to have a job. So think of that perspective. So I was trying to get a job in architecture. I interviewed in close to a dozen different places and only met one female architect, and she was the daughter of the owner of the firm. So I never got into architecture. But I did work for Philips Lighting Company packing light bulbs. That was fun. And I learned Dutch. When we came back to the US, I worked for free for synthesis architects because I talked my way in the door. And I said, I will work for you for free. I need to reconnect with my skills. I've been away for 1.5 years from this work, almost 2 years from this work. Actually 2.5 when you count it Up With People, but I need practice and I will be of help to you. And then I talked them into hiring me at $10 an hour. And 2 weeks later, I was fired because I was doing drafting work on the side for somebody who, surprisingly enough, was in a lawsuit with synthesis. And I didn't know that. So all of a sudden I called this person who I was doing drafting work on the side for and said, I'm available full time. You can hire me, please. So I ended up working for him. And there were about probably 10 more firms I've worked for. Architecture is a tough business. I would say that once in the middle of all this, in my mid-30s, I had Eric, my son, and ended up working for a local architect with my son crawling around at my feet in his office, which was awesome. Unfortunately, the reason I ended up doing that was because the firm I had worked for wanted me back after 6 weeks after having a child. And I had thought they were going to have me be half-time for a while and then full-time after about 1 year. They wanted me back full-time at 6 weeks, no matter what. And I could not do that. I said, I'm only going to have one child. I better take advantage of, that time. So I worked part-time carrying him around, which was awesome. I did get a really good job with Thomas Associates in downtown Albany. That's when things started to change for my husband and I. We had a little more stability. We lived in a mobile home in Petersburg, and we were driving back and forth, and my son was going to Montessori school. And then things didn't work out with Thomas Associates, and I ended up working for Collins and Scoville Architects. And that's when I felt like my feet were grounded in architecture. I was a project manager. Sustainability was actually a word that people understood. I was involved with the U.S. Green Building Council. I became a lead AP, really specializing. I was doing design work, and I was also the person in the office who took the cardboard home with me and the batteries, because we didn't have those services in the office. I was constantly reminding people of these things, and I started presenting at that point too. I think that presenting is the thing that gives me the most joy. This is kind of me just telling a story, but presenting and crafting a presentation is also really fulfilling. I fell into that kind of by accident because I was part of a green building salon where they had presentations, and one night the person who ran the program was complaining that her speaker for the next month had dropped out and she didn't know what she was going to do. And before I could control the words coming out of my mouth, I said, I'll do it. And in a month, I was presenting to about 100 people. So that was cool. Collins and Scoville really felt like a home. And I encourage anyone who's in any business to find a home. That's a marvelous thing. I'm really pleased that I think I've found that same kind of feeling again after 15 years of working for the government. Taking the job, I was on track to be an owner at Collins and Scoville. And then what happened was, it was on, be careful about opening your mouth when you're volunteering your time, because people either like it or hate it. And in this case, they liked it. And I ended up getting a job offering that I couldn't say no to, which changed everything. And it was a good thing overall, but it was an interesting bump. I was part of a team advising on greening the executive mansion in New York State. And I tend to be one of the few architects in the room when we're talking about sustainability, which I find fascinating. My entire grounding is in the green building industry, but when there's policy work going on, there are very few architects and engineers involved. There might be people who are involved with natural systems, like just really from Department of Environmental Conservation, working on fish and wildlife and understanding forestry systems. But people who know how to build buildings aren't usually there. Even in working on the executive mansion, there were some people involved with facilities management, but nobody who had ever been involved with the LEED rating system or built a building, designed a building. So the perspectives are different. And I raised my voice with a couple of off-the-wall suggestions, and I think that it's really important to bring those off-the-wall suggestions into the room, because we need to think differently. So if we're always regurgitating the same stuff that we've always done, we'll never find the new things that we need. And Judith Enck, who was the Deputy Secretary of the Environment at that time for the state of New York under Governor Spitzer, I don't know how she figured this out. She ended up somehow convincing the Dormitory Authority executive director at the time to create a position and hire me for it, even though he didn't know who I was. And even though nobody knew what a director of sustainability was supposed to do, which was great. And I went in there, and I think my only regret about that position is just as I started to feel confident in what a director of sustainability should be, the institution started to have leaders who understood less how important it was. And so my timing was off in my own evolution in that moment. The first 5 years were incredibly dynamic and knowledge-filled, and starting in, I was involved in climate action planning with 400 people from all over the nation, and even some foreign inputs into the processes in 2010. And then that information all got put on a shelf in New York State, and nobody really looked at it. The process was really important because a lot of people took that process and started implementing it, even though no one told them to. And that's key. And that's why process is so important. Because as soon as you engage people in the thought work, it's not like they can put it on a shelf. It's already there. And that's what I think is really exciting about sustainability. So that was, in 2010, we started to green New York State. We worked Interagency, which was another thing that was very new. Before 2008, state entities weren't really allowed to talk to each other. Nobody from the Dormitory Authority would have been able to pick up the phone and call NYSERDA or call DEC or call the construction fund or SUNY and say, hey, we do this way, how do you do it? But the interagency committee that was formed because of Executive Order number 4 forced people to start meeting and talking. And that process, there's my favorite word, started us building not only relationships with each other, but we created an ability to build off of the work of each other. So really the ability to amplify the successes was huge. And part of my role in that is the celebration side, and why I think some people take joy as counter to professionalism, as if they can't be held in the same moments. And I heartily disagree with that, because if you don't have joy in your work and you don't have joy in connecting with the people around you, I mean, what's the point, really? As simple as that. And the joy and the ability to celebrate gives you the opportunity to really identify what's working and to embrace what didn't work as knowledge for the next steps. And as soon as you take celebration out of that mix, that won't happen, because people are too afraid. And that's, there's too much work to do to be afraid. It takes so much energy to be afraid. So DASNY was a fantastic experience in those regards. I didn't make nearly as much progress within DASNY as I had hoped to do. I felt like the last 4 or 5 years were especially difficult because I'm saying this without bitterness because I'm in a really great place right now, but I was told that they would know when they needed me, which is counter truly to what we all need to remember. There's no way we can know everything. There's no way we can know who has insights for us. There is no way to just settle on what's familiar and what's comfortable to us as individuals in our lives or in our professions. So some days I struggle with this, but every day I strive to make sure I'm like eyes wide open and I'm reaching out to people and saying, this is what I'm trying. This is what I'm doing. This has worked for me before. And none of those pieces of information preclude you from telling me that it's not working for you. Tell me what I can do better. And if every sentence starts with that kind of notion of what can I do better, or what can I do different, or how am I being heard, then it pulls people closer to the work, and it keeps you tremendously honest in the work. I have moments of arrogance because I think I've been doing this for a while, and some things I feel like I know. And invariably, somebody makes me realize I don't have the right to be arrogant, and that's okay. So now I work for EYP. EYP is an architecture and engineering firm. What's really cool, and I'm going to share this with you, and it's going to be on the recording. Maybe EYP won't like that. I'm going to say it anyway. When I first got out of college, my very first interview was with EYP, and it didn't go well. I walked into the interview, and I was a very poor college student, and I had a black dress on and a vest, and I had a roll of drawings and a small portfolio. And there were 3 guys behind a table. And I introduced myself, and they said, if you don't have respect for us enough to wear a suit, we don't have time to interview you. So I told that story at my interviews with EYP this time around, because I think it's very funny. And they all started laughing, thank goodness, on a Zoom call, because they were like, wow, EYP's really changed. we're not like that at all. Like we're all sitting here on a Zoom call in our jeans and slippers. When we go into the office, it's to work. We're not wearing suits unless we have to for a presentation to a client. So that was a really great icebreaker. It was a little bit of a risk, but I took it anyway. There are 11 offices nationwide. As the managing principal of the Albany office, this is an entirely new thing for me. It's not sustainability in the title. And yet, the reason I reached for this job was because I was realizing in my trying to find jobs in sustainability that, first of all, every single sustainability director position, you need a master's degree, which I don't have. So there's one thing. Sustainability positions didn't exist when I started. I've been doing the work for 15 years. I knew I could make the case, but that was kind of an interesting take for me. And then I realized that I have always preached that sustainability is in everything we do. So why couldn't it be in a managing principal's position? And even in the couple of months, it's only been 2.5 months that I've been at EYP, I've recognized their great skill in sustainability, but also that they still keep it a little separate. It's in a unit called Green Lab, and they know when they need them. So how do we do what I always think is really important, ingrain sustainability into how everyone in that entire office thinks? Like, how can sustainability inform the work? Not how do we add it on once the project is designed, but where is its value in the daily work? And that comes down to language and relationships and health and well-being. It comes down to the project work, how we market. And if you take a look at EYP's website, I'm really pleased that they truly have sustainability, equity, connectivity all built into how they talk about their work and how they promote their staff, which I think is wonderful. And it's a pretty fun place, I'm discovering, which is also good. Even in times of stress, they allow themselves to have fun, which I think is exemplary. So that's my big arc of the story. I hope I'm at EYP for a long time. I also, of course, being a Gemini and being an eclectic soul, I want to still be on Broadway. I don't know if that'll ever happen. I'm completing my 46 high peaks. That will happen. And, you know, I knit and I paint and I read and I dance and I sing and I do whatever I can get away with. So there you go.
Thanks, Jodi. That's, I think it's important to learn more about the people behind the positions too. And you've done a really good job of of conveying that with all of its ups and downs in your perspective. I had a kind of specific question, or at least the question is about specificity. Can you give us an example of, say, in your current position, how sustainability has manifested itself in, say, a built project? And I don't know if it would be a residential or a commercial or an institutional project or whatever you.
Right. Well, I would say that what's interesting, I haven't been directly involved with project work with EYP yet. I am aware of some of their work. I would say that one of the places I think is an opportunity to explore sustainability deeper is one of the sectors that EYP focuses on is healthcare. And I'm a really big proponent, and there should be a paper coming out soon about looking at residence halls this way. Like, what should a residence hall be? Not what can we do slightly differently, but what is a residence hall? So I want to do the same with healthcare and understand, especially in COVID, we've experienced that people need health resources closer to their homes. They need faster response times. They need access in a different way. They need, of course, telehealth. So how do all of those things kind of combine? Should we be moving away from mega hospitals that are very centralized into a lot of community-based resources? And you see that with all the different urgent care interactions, but should that be part of a hospital network system as well? And how does that reflect architecturally? And how does that not only reflect architecturally, but shouldn't that combine with the resilience planning for the small city, perhaps? And then that healthcare location, which makes everything much more accessible, that could be the EV charging station, that could be the shelter in place station, that could be attached to community resources in other ways. And I think we have to be much more fluid in our thinking about that. Does that come close to answering your question?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that we emphasize in our program is this very notion of integrated systems thinking as kind of, or process, if you will, as pretty much a foundational way of thinking about the world. So that was a great example. Yasser has a question for you.
Sure.
Referring back to the slide that showed the worst best case scenario,
yes,
with the coal plants. He was asking if that was in what was the context for that? Was that United States residential,
sure,
or the work?
Yeah, that was U.S. multifamily of a certain scale, and the reason that slide came up, it was in a presentation about embodied carbon. And it was a discussion of the impact of just changing some basic materials in a building, and then also the impact of moving toward mass timber, because using grown materials can reduce your embodied carbon to negative. And so the illustration was to say, look, here's business as usual, and here's what can happen if we're actually making deliberate decisions about embodied carbon. Boom. And we could turn the right the ship or turn the ship much faster if we were doing that.
So just within the sector of multifamily housing in the US, this is illustrating the potential for a change in process. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's a perfect word, potential, because, and in regenerative practice, which is something I've been studying and really engaging in, what you do is you build together what the potential is, so that everyone knows what the potential is. There might be 1,000,010 different ways to get to that potential, and you might not get to it this year or next year, but so long as you always have that North Star, you can figure out the path between. And that's really incredible. And I don't know if any of you have heard about what's happening in Albany with the Albany Riverfront Collaborative, and talking about breaking down our highway. And this has happened also in Syracuse. There's been a highway reduction, infrastructure to boulevards kind of thing. We have created that volunteer team has created kind of our ideation of what the potential is for the waterfront and the communities of Albany, which gives us a roadmap to fold every single project that people can envision into that kind of umbrella view. And that's really exciting and sustainable, because it's not limiting anyone's thought process. It's activating the thought process.
Great, thanks. Yasser has a follow-up question.
Sure.
In your experience, what is the biggest obstacle to make the transition to these best practices? And how do you think they, students, us as managers, can contribute to that transition?
I think there are two things that are equal in my mind. The first is our embarrassment about lessons learned or failure or whatever. If we can just get in the mindset of recognizing the value of that information and cherishing it. I mean, if you make a mistake and that gives you the next step, the next better step, what an incredible amount of wonderful information that is. And we don't value that at all. So that's one thing. We should start to value that. And the other one is thinking that it's all or nothing, right? There is such a mentality of, I see it online all the time, people are like, especially with everything that's happening with Ukraine and Russia and this war, and it's horrible, and fossil fuels being part of that. The discussion on Twitter today, as an example, oh, we got to move to EVs immediately, blah, 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 blah. Everyone's like, we can't do that because of this, that, and the other thing. We can't do that because of this. Yes, we have to do that because it's our only choice. There's never one choice, and there's never one moment. Nature is incredibly messy. So if nature were solving the problem of getting off fossil fuel, and she really is through us, if she had more of a say in it, she would say bikes, walkability, tighter communities, better neighborhood friendliness, stand out on your porch and have conversations, don't build a building without a front stoop. She would say, make sure there are more groceries and more local production of food. And yes, electric vehicles, and there are going to be fossil fuel vehicles around for quite a while. And let's make them less comfortable to be in. And. So we can't just, we're too used to turning on the faucet and turning on and off the lights. I think we should have to pedal to turn on the TV.
Yeah, thanks for that perspective. And it's a good plug for design thinking too, in terms of, you know, thinking about alternatives and thinking about multiple alternatives as a way of moving forward. So thanks.
There's this great visual clue that I like too. In one building I saw a while ago, they were trying to reduce their water usage. So they created a whole cistern system to gather rainwater, but they also had a clear tube. This was at a school, a clear tube near the front entry with a big red ball in it. And so everyone walking in could see the height of that red ball and understand how much water was available for the whole school. So when the ball was down at the bottom, everyone immediately, in the back of their mind, was like, okay, I really should be careful. And when it was way up here, it was a lot more relaxed. And it was beautiful.
Yeah, great. We're scheduled to end at 1:45, but typically anyone who's interested in continuing to ask questions are welcome to ask them. Anyone who needs to get off, thank you for joining us. Jodi, I hope you can stick around for a few more minutes. And if anyone has any questions, now would be a great time to ask them. and feel free to open up your mic. Sue, you raised your hand.
Yes. Okay, let me put that down quick. So first of all, Jodi, thank you. I could hang on your word forever and never. So thank you.
You're welcome.
I've had the pleasure of working with Jodi on some committees and seeing her present. So I have a really good sense that her hands are in so much. They're in everything. And that's something I greatly admire, but I also fall into that trap. So I have a few questions I fashioned into one mega question for you. So how do you stay organized, moving projects forward while keeping your wheels from spinning?
Wow.
So you can prioritize to make sure you aren't stretched so thin. Because I see you as being someone who is cuttingly effective, but I'm sure I see the productivity side of it. I don't see the struggle side of it. So how do you get it done and keep that joy and not get stretched then?
I'd say that all right, so there are times when I feel overwhelmed, but it's mostly when there are small projects that I just need to focus on a little harder. Like I mentioned that residence hall document. It should have been done a couple of months ago, but with my leaving DASNY, my hands were off it for a little while, and now I'm getting pulled back in. So I really just have to block time to work on that, because the sense of relief when that is actually out the door is going to be immense. And I know that. I think that the way to keep your head on your shoulders is to make sure things are fun. And when something isn't fun, at least be honest with yourself if you're not able to be honest with everyone else, you know, and at least cut yourself some slack on that. I think the other time I get stressed is I tend to be the kind of person that this is going to sound like I'm better than I am, but I do things when they're handed to me, because then I don't have to remember them, and remembering them is actually harder. So I just have to make sure to balance that with the stuff that I need to focus on. And I do struggle with that at times. And all of it has to be fun. I mean, in this new role at EYP, and I thought that this was going to be overwhelming, but it's actually been great so far. I'm trying to build a culture back to that office, because it felt a little neglected for a while. As far as it's hard to connect people when everything's remote access, and it's hard to have a spirit and a central heart to an office when people are scattered and working cross offices across the nation. So I set up a list of 10 local craft beverage places and 10 local hikes that are around 1.5 miles to 2 miles long. And every month at the start of the month, I'm saying, okay, I'm going to be on Thursday at 5 o'clock, I'm going to be at Peebles Island. Anyone who wants to join me, please join me, or on Wednesday after work, on the 22nd or whatever, I'm going to be at Rare Form Brewery. And if someone joins me, that's great. And if they don't, they don't. And just by building that personal connection, it takes time, but it's more fulfilling, which makes it easier to do the harder work. And I get outside or I have a beer. Look for the co-benefits. That's
the co-benefits to that.
Yeah, right. Does that help, Sue? Because I know you're in everything. I think the other piece is don't expect, you probably won't see the direct results of what you're doing as evidently as other people will. And remember that on occasion, because the benefits are there and the results are there. You just might not be able to see them because you're demanding performance from yourself at a different level.
Delaney, Ann, Yasser, do you have any questions? Not to put you on the spot, but want to make sure you get a chance if you want.
No, my question was answered. Thank you so much, Jodi, for a great presentation.
Oh, you're welcome, Yasser. Thanks for joining us.
Jodi, I have a question.
Sure.
Sorry, Ann, you unmuted. Go.
I was just saying what you said about learning from your mistakes. Like, I want to say one of my first presentations I ever attended as a recycling specialist at Okra was some conference on composting, and I don't know what his title was. He was up in Oswego County, Frank Visser, I believe, and he talked about what a nightmare it was salmon season with composting, and just how they tried this and it was a nightmare, and they tried this and it didn't work, and like rotting fish waste, like worst possible thing, right? And then even when they did compost it, the end product wasn't sellable or usable. It was it was funny. First of all, the presentation was the most entertaining one I've ever seen. But like, you learned more from it than someone saying, I did this and it ran perfect and there was no mistakes and it was beautiful. Like, you learn way more from your mistakes, and therefore you can learn from other people's mistakes. And I welcome any presentation at any conference that is honest like that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that. I think one of my biggest struggles at DASNY was fairly recently, well, in the last 2 or 3 years, about SUNY Oneonta, and we approached a project with the knowledge we had at hand. And when all the proposals came in, they were significantly over budget, like $10 million over budget each for what we needed to achieve. And so we said, what did we learn from this? And we figured out how we had approached it in a poor way to get what we wanted. And I was like, let's go talk about this. This is something that all the SUNY campuses can learn from. This is a huge bit of information about district energy and how that changes how we approach residence halls. And there were quite a few people at DASNY that said, oh, we can't talk about that project because we failed. And meanwhile, the Lachlan Squire from SUNY Oneonta was like, that was an awesome process. I know exactly how to tackle my system now. I never would have learned that if we hadn't done what we did. So I talk about it all the time.
So Jodi, one last question.
Sure.
Maybe. So you mentioned master's degrees are required for positions. We'd like to dispute that point, but I won't.
No, go ahead and dispute it. I mean, when I was looking, that's all I was finding.
No, right. Yeah. I mean, actually, as the discipline becomes more normalized, we're seeing quite an expansion of positions that have sustainability in their title, and therefore more opportunity. But even so, if you were back in school and could forecast yourself to where you are now, what courses do you wish you had taken then that would help you now?
Psychology and communication and marketing. Those 3 avenues of pursuit are things that you never learn as an architect, even though I think they all matter to building design. And then now in my position, I don't know enough about running a business. And so the whole idea of staffing and utilization rates, these are things that I'm getting acclimated to. I wish I had more experience to build on. But I mean, behavior change is all psychology and communication, right? And then marketing, for some reason, in the 2020s, we think marketing is putting things on a website and walking away. Marketing, that's putting things on a website and walking away.
Right, which has the same impact as putting things in a book or putting something on a shelf.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Can I ask a question of the people here? So this is one of the things, along with being on Broadway, although I have been on off Broadway.
You're talking anyway. Through the wall. You're talking through the 4th wall.
Yeah, I want to actually. I've been thinking about writing a book. I have a blog site. I have a YouTube channel. There are so many things I'm learning from people, but do books matter anymore? That's my question.
I'm going to ask someone. I'm going to wait for someone else to answer that one.
Well, do you have a TikTok yet? That seems to where the action's at, right?
Yeah, I'm not on TikTok, although I'm intrigued by the whole shanty channel on TikTok, sea shanties. That would be pretty cool. No, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. Twitter is old school now, but there I am.
But if you write a book, then you get to do the promo tour and are featured on whether it's news channels or radio or so even if people don't hear it or read it, they hear about it through those.
That is true.
I say books matter. I'm just being
all right. So we got to vote for books matter.
Yes, I say books matter.
These books matter to me. I've got I read probably 40 or 50 books a year. I need to read more nonfiction. I haven't quite upped my nonfiction game, but I'm doing pretty well this year so far.
Right. I would say it matters even just from the perspective of, as you've presented, the process of you going through the process of thinking through what is in that book.
Yeah.
How many people read it? I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think that still advances us to have someone get that those thoughts together.
So after I get my feet stable at EYP, I'm going to start to ask myself some tough questions like, who is this for? Is it for me or is it for other people?
I want to say books definitely matter, especially so for me. I didn't read much when I was a student because I was so busy doing other things, but now I am reinvigorating my love for books. But whenever I meet with students and I'm getting to know them, we do our introductory questions. And the one I started to ask is, what books have you read lately? Because initially I thought they'd be like, oh, I'm not really reading too many books. Every student I've asked is reading a book now. It's amazing.
That's fantastic.
It's amazing. So I don't know. I think they definitely matter for myself and the generation that typically gets pigeonholed into just having a quick time span. I think they're still reading.
That's good to know. Cool.
I want to acknowledge your Sesame Street scene there in the background too.
Yeah, Big Bird.
Lego?
It's Lego. It was my birthday present this year. We're a Lego family, and actually now I'm more into wooden construction.
I saw that too.
So that's another one. We got Legos all over the place. We have Wally up there. You can't see Wally. He's on the top shelf. And our games.
Can I throw out one other question? I don't know if it'll be quick. Maybe it will.
Well, you've got 3 minutes, Kathy.
Okay, I'll be quick. What do you do if a client approaches you and they have it, and basically the site is you don't want to work with their site, right?
Why do you not want to work with their site?
If in your perspective, it's just not, it's detracting from, what all aspects of sustainability that you want to work towards. And I know this is, maybe it's too much to ask.
Then you hire a landscape architect to find the
No. It's an interesting question because here's the thing, and this is an evolution, and I didn't get into this, the evolution of my understanding of sustainability. It's changed quite a bit from when I was bringing batteries and cardboard home from Collins and Scoble. Although that's still part of it, through regenerative practice, I've come to realize that every single situation is striving to give you information for your design to be something you never knew it could be. And so even a site that is very unappealing, if it's unappealing, I think identifying why it's unappealing, if it doesn't support the purpose of the project, that's one thing. But if it's got constraints and things that could be healed by the project, if you approach the project differently, then that site can really be the thing that that truly magnifies the benefit of that work. I don't think we should do projects anymore if they're not also striving to heal some of nature's systems, like connecting aquifers and improving the tree canopy and cleaning the air and cleaning the water. So a site that's ugly and awful has an awful lot of potential. It's
Jodi,
not easy.
Your excitement and energy is definitely contagious for all of this. So maybe I've noticed I like this one myself.
A guy at work sent it to me. I just started poking through it.
So you're going to want to also read this one.
Okay, good. I haven't heard of that one.
You're going to want this one. This one
All right.
is incredible. John Cotter.
I have one for you. Tit for
I'm
tat.
ready.
There's a book by an economist. His name is Rutger Bregman. And the book is, all right, what's the name of it? It's shoot, it totally escapes me. His first book was Utopia. His second book was not Happiness, Humankind. And I forget what the subtitle is, but it's called Humankind by Rutger Bregman. And it's about how we have traditionally designed systems to protect us against the worst performance, as opposed to supporting and fulfilling the potential for the best performance. Our education systems, our incarceration systems, our healthcare systems, all of these systems are unfortunately designed to make sure people don't fail, as opposed to making sure people aspire to greatness.
It's like you know me. I'm getting it. I'll have this one by the end of the day. Jodi,
all right. You're welcome.
All right. I think, Jodi, I want to thank you for your time and everyone else for participating and engaging. Looking forward to hearing more about your career.
Thank you. Me too.
As it continues to evolve. Yeah.
Right. Who knows?
Thanks so much for joining us today. And anyone else? Kathy, you want to close us out?
Well, actually, let me just say, anybody here, reach out to me if you ever need anything. Feel free to share Kathy to share my contact information. That's totally fine. Yep. And yeah, I like the fact that people can build on each other's ideas and passion. So thank you very much.
That was perfect. I will email a follow-up with your information and book suggestions and a link to the recording. So thank you for your time, everyone, especially Jodi.